And I want to start by asking you some questions. I have 3 questions for you, and I want you to answer them silently in your head, but honestly. 1, do you think you work more hours than your parents did? 2, when someone asks, how are you? Do you ever answer, busy? And 3, what is the latest time you've ever checked your email? I mean, what time of night was it? I ask you these questions because statistically speaking, it's pretty likely your answers were yes, yes, and at best, midnight. A global survey conducted by Microsoft showed most people feel overworked right now, and nearly 40% are exhausted. A survey in 2017 found that burnout in the US was at epidemic levels. And since the pandemic began, the problem has worsened dramatically. So early last year, 45% of workers, that's nearly half, reported feeling symptoms of burnout. That was in April. By August, that number had risen to nearly 60%. And if anything, it's worse in Southeast Asia. A third of Indian workers say their feelings of burnout increased in the past year, and more than half say their stress is caused by either not enough differentiation between work life and home life or unmanageable work hours. So how are you? No, seriously, how are you doing? Research says most of us say, I'm fine at least 14 times a week, and only about 1 in 5 of us actually mean it. I bet you're tired. I bet you're stressed. Me too. It's like we're all on this treadmill that's turned up to an uncomfortable speed, and we're pushing and pushing and pushing and getting nowhere. So I want to take this time to help you step off this treadmill that is wearing you down. I spent years researching this and ultimately writing a book about it, but I wasn't trying to write a book. I started the research because I was trying to solve my own problem. In the fall of 2017, I was overwhelmed and exhausted, and after a lifetime of good health, I was getting sick all the time. When I developed my 3rd case of bronchitis in less than a year, I knew something had to change. So I started to read every research study and meta-analysis I could find on overwork. I expected to discover that tech was the cause of my problem. I even went analog for a month. I got an old school phone that couldn't access email, deleted my Facebook account. It helped a little, but not a lot. So I kept digging. I kept peeling back the layers of the onion, searching for the source of all the stress, the root of my belief that if I'm not working, I should feel guilty. And I found it. But what I found was that I'm not really the problem, and neither are you. The causes of burnout are historic and systemic. Now, researchers say there are 6 main drivers of burnout, and they are overwork, feeling like you're not in control, a lack of appreciation, a breakdown of community, unfair treatment, and a mismatch of skills and values. That means the discrepancy between what your job duties are and what your personal values or your skills are. Do you notice anything about this list? Everything here is a function of your work environment. None of this will be solved by self-care. I'm going to give you some science-backed practical tips today, things that you can do to feel a little less pressure, a little less overwhelmed. But it's important to understand that ultimately, the burnout epidemic is caused by global societal forces, and it will take a movement, a revolution, to reclaim our time and our well-being. That's what I discovered when I started digging into the roots of my own anxiety. My research led me back to the Industrial Revolution, and here's what they don't tell you in history class. Human beings lived one way for a very long time, for most of 300,000 years or so. All over the world, in many different cultures, you see a similar pattern. People worked for half the year or less. They engaged in very intense work, like bringing in a harvest, and then they celebrated for a week or 2. They spent days celebrating weddings and holidays, not afternoons. And then came the Industrial Revolution, and it all changed. We didn't need artisans or fine craftsmen anymore. Factories just needed able bodies and lots of people's time. Employers started demanding 16-hour workdays. Think about that. There are 24 hours a day. They wanted their employees to work for all but 8 of them and somehow eat and sleep in the remaining time. We had religious leaders telling us that idleness is sinful. We had government leaders telling us hard workers are good citizens. And we had corporate leaders telling us working long hours is how you get ahead, that you somehow earn success by working on weekends and refusing to take vacation time. In 2018, someone asked Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, about work hours. She said, "What's the correct number of hours to work each week in order to change the world?" And Musk answered, "About 80 sustained hours and up to 100 hours a week." 100 work hours a week. Listen, there are only 168 total hours in a week, and we're supposed to spend 49 of those sleeping, which means Elon Musk wants you to sometimes have only 19 hours each week to not work. I mean, due respect to Elon Musk, but that is crap advice. Here's the truth. On average, people who work excessive hours only earn about 6% more than those who work a more reasonable schedule. And research shows people who take at least 11 days of vacation every year are more likely to get a raise than people who don't. And putting in 80 hours a week isn't productive either. Decades ago, they did a study in Chicago, and they followed a bunch of scientists and technicians around for a long period of time. And here's what they found. The least productive of the group were the ones who worked excessive hours. The most productive were the ones who worked maybe 2 to 5 hours a day, putting in maybe 10 to 20 hours a week. At some point, when you start working excessive hours, there is a diminishing rate of returns, mainly because we simply don't have the capacity as human beings to continue working and working and working without end. So we're going to talk a bit about what you can do, because keep in mind that some of this is out of your control, what you can do to feel a little less pressure, to feel a little bit more relaxed in your life. And the first thing that you can do is to not buy into the busy. Stop saying that you're busy all the time. Stop saying you don't have time for things. They're all surrounding you are messages telling you that you should be busy and not idle constantly. This idea that your worth as a human being is inextricably tied to how much you work is ridiculous. We work to make enough to support ourselves so we can enjoy time with our loved ones, with nature, with art and poetry and food and music and sports. Work is just a means to an end. It doesn't define you. So being idle doesn't mean you're being lazy. Being idle is a sign of success. Having free time is an indication that you're working when you need to meet your obligations, and then you leave work behind and you live. This is something that you need to accept emotionally and intellectually. You are not your work. You do not need work to live. If I gave you a couple $1 million right now, you could live very happily and healthily for the rest of your life without working. The next step is to set your opening and closing time. There is work you and there is off work you. So when do you flip that sign to open, and when do you turn it around to closed and lock the doors? If your work hours are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., you should not be answering work emails at 8. You're probably not being paid to be on call all day and night, so don't be. Separate your work inbox from your personal inbox, and don't look at it unless you're on the clock. Number 3, if you do work at home, either full-time or some of the time, designate a workspace and only work there. You know, when you're having trouble sleeping, the doctor will often tell you to do nothing in bed except sleep. No eating, no watching TV, no working on your laptop. Why? Because you want to train your brain that the bed is the place where you sleep. Now, many of us carry our laptops into the dining room and they answer work emails from the bathroom. We are carrying our work through the whole house and training our brains that every corner of our home is for work. That means your home is not a refuge anymore. It means there's no place for you to go where you can relax. Choose a place in your home where you do work, and the rest of your home should be for not working. Number 4, one thing at a time. Stop trying to multitask all day. The truth is, human brains, the brains of Homo sapiens, cannot multitask. Some species, like pigeons, can, but we can't. So instead of doing one thing at a time, what your brain is trying to do is switch between 2 or 3 things as quickly as possible. And that causes all kinds of problems when you try to force your brain to do something it can't do. First of all, the quality of the work you're doing on both tasks drops dramatically. Also, it lowers your IQ. Research from the University of London showed that men who tried to multitask saw their IQs drop by 15 points, which means they were cognitively equivalent to an 8-year-old child. What's worse, over time, you could actually be doing damage to your brain. Scientists in the UK took MRI scans of people's brains and found those who'd multitasked heavily had less brain density than those who didn't. And the loss of brain matter was most prevalent here, in the area related to empathy and emotional control. And following workers around has shown that we lose up to 40% of our productive time to switch costs. Those are those fractions of seconds it takes your brain to shift focus from one thing to another. Listen, I could go on and on and on about this. People who multitask have much higher levels of cortisol, meaning they're feeling more stressed. Multitasking can lead to poor decisions and exhaustion. The scientific opinion on this is mostly in agreement, and it's mostly negative. So what I want you to do is be like this dog. Focus on one thing at a time. Number 5 is take frequent breaks. Take a look at these brain scans from a study from Microsoft. The blue and the green correlate to a more relaxed brain. The red and yellow are signs of stress and anxiety. In the bottom row, that person took at least a 10-minute break in between work calls. Along the top is the person who went from one call to another to another. You are not helping yourself by sitting at your computer for hour after hour. Get up and take a break. Number 6, control your to-do list. It should not be a rolling list. Decide how many tasks you need to get done each day, and when you get them done, stop doing stuff. Don't just add more things or start on tomorrow's tasks. Separate your to-do items into days. And then, when you're finished, be done. Number 7, take up a hobby. Not something you can post pictures of on Insta or sell on Etsy. Not something that makes you a better person or strengthens your brand. Something kind of pointless. Something you just like doing, like polishing rocks or bird watching or making ugly cupcakes or stamp collecting. Something for you that you do because you like it and for no other reason. And finally, number 8, watch your language. And I don't mean stop swearing. Swearing is awesome. I mean, many cultures have adopted language that is abusive to workers. Take note of what you say and cut out anything that glorifies overwork or shames you for not working. Stop saying you're too busy to go to lunch all the time. Stop saying you don't have time for anything. And please, please, don't say rise and grind. I want that phrase to disappear in flames. You are not a knife to be ground against stone. You are not a machine. You are a human being who needs to laugh and play and think deeply and relax. If you're going to hustle over to a chair and read a book. If you're going to push harder, push the door closed hard and take a nap. Don't buy another productivity app. Buy a hammock. Do the work that you need to do in order to pay your bills, and then flip that sign over to closed. Sit back, relax, and do nothing at all. Thanks.